We lived on a farm on the Limpopo River on the border of South Africa. Our nearest shop of any significance was about 200 kilometers away. The rivers were full of crocodiles. We had snakes everywhere. We were homeschooled. So I have a slightly younger brother and then a younger sister. We were all pretty close in age, so they were my closest friends growing up. We did many things together, and then we also all had our own particular interests. So I became obsessed with Greek mythology and spent hours reading and learning about that. My brother would take apart any electrical or mechanical item he could get his hands on and put it back together. And my sister was obsessed with all the Latin names for the flora and fauna around us. And we rode horses obsessively, and as an example of my parents' approach to encouraging resilience and courage in their children, the first ponies we got were unbroken because my dad thought it would be an instructive challenge to break in a pony while learning to ride for the first time. So we were constantly covered in bruises, constantly falling off into thorn bushes and picking ourselves up, dusting ourselves off literally and metaphorically, and getting back in the saddle. And that has been a theme of my childhood and my professional life, dusting myself off and getting back in the saddle, stronger, hopefully wiser. The very first business I started was when I was 9. It was almost my 10th birthday, and I was obsessed with horse riding. And per my family's usual approach to things, I didn't have a lot of kit. I had a very ancient second-hand saddle, and I was desperate just to look a bit cooler and get a more modern saddle. So I was pestering my parents for this, and they said, look, you can have one, but you have to help us buy one. You have to contribute to it. So I thought, pocket money, please. And they were like, no, you have to earn some money to contribute. And I said, how do you do that? And they said, well, you've got to start a business. And I said, how do you do that? And they said, well, find a problem to solve. And I cast my mind over the conversations that we had in our household. And my mother used to go on and on about how terrible it was to battery farm chickens for meat and for eggs. And I thought, oh, this is an interesting opportunity. Maybe I can create happy eggs. And then I looked into the industry a bit, and I realized that all these chickens were sent to death after about 2 years of intensive laying. So for my 10th birthday, ended up going to a chicken farm not far from where we lived and rescuing 20 death row battery hens and bringing them back to happiness and to life and to egg laying. And I would sell those happy eggs in the local town. So we all developed these different obsessions. There was no shape of a typical day. Every day was just expansive with possibility. So it might involve, we found a dead animal and we dissected it with my father, who's a doctor, as part of a biology lesson. It might be helping my parents as they designed a new house for us to live in. It might be a whole day spent listening to my mother read books to us. And I think books were absolutely central to schooling for us. They were our teachers, and we would often spend days and days working our way through a book. And we read a lot ourselves, but we were read to a lot. And one of the benefits I reflect on often is I think being read to is very powerful for creativity, because you can completely lose yourself in stories. You're not doing any of the work, you're just receiving these stories being told. It also helps you write well. And I went on to work at the Financial Times for a bit, and then to write one book, and I'm finishing up a second. And I think listening to books for hours and hours on end was incredibly helpful in that respect. My brother has worked in the clean tech space quite a lot. He sold his last company to General Motors. My sister is currently doing a documentary on a former prisoner in South Africa. That's an area I've actually worked in extensively. I co-founded an organization which taught coding to prisoners and ex-offenders and young people at risk of offending in South Africa, in some of the most deprived regions around Cape Town. And that work was incredibly impactful. We were getting ex-offenders into coding jobs. We were seeing lives changed. It was inspiring, we were winning awards. But ultimately, the more time I spent there, the more frustrated I became, because if prison teaches you any lesson, it's that most people are there not because they are fundamentally bad people, but because for probably upwards of 95% of them, at some point in their lives, they have been let down by policy, by health policy, education policy, justice policy. And the more work I did in prisons and with prisoners, the more I felt I was just putting bandages on wounds that should never have been inflicted. So I became obsessed with doing my next big entrepreneurial endeavor in a way that I could work on systems, that I could help change problems at source, where there was leverage. And you don't get higher leverage when it comes to systems change than governments and the 200 million people working in governments around the world who control about 40% of GDP, who make decisions and govern policies that affect all of our lives, that shape our economies. So the government space became very interesting to me. I'm co-founder and CEO of Apolitical. Apolitical is a unique network and learning platform for any public servant at city level, at multilateral level. Today we are used by about 250,000 public servants in 160 different countries. We reach millions more through partnerships with governments around the world, with schools of governments, with government learning platforms in wealthy countries and in poor countries, in right-wing administrations and in left-wing administrations. And public servants use us to find and share best practice to common challenges and to improve their skills on areas that are central to success for governments in the 21st century, whether that's navigating AI or addressing climate change. And these are all conversations playing out on Apolitical in our communities of practice, where public servants in South Africa will be talking to public servants in Canada, where public servants in Brazil will be talking to public servants in the UK. Every one of us has at some point traveled to another city or country, heard about another city or country and thought, why isn't my government doing that? Every city, every country is different, but there is more in common in cities and countries with your near neighbors, often even with your distant neighbors, than there is that's different. So often public servants are working on similar challenges with similar solutions which are easily adoptable and adaptable. What could you unlock? What is the power of the hive mind of government if you could make it possible for any public servant anywhere in the world to, at the tip of their fingers, find the solutions, the hard-won lessons and solutions of other public servants in other cities and in other countries. So one way in which we think about quantifying the impact we want to have is to ask ourselves this question. What if we could take 1% of government's collective around 30 trillion annual budget and ensure it is spent 50% more effectively? That would unlock $150 billion each year for society. Whether you love government or hate it, whether you want big government or small government, whatever you think of government, governments are here to stay. They're affecting all of our lives, and making them better, making them smarter, making them fit for the time in which we live, rather than often remaining in the 20th, sometimes 19th century, seems like one of the most exciting problems in the world to work on. Because if you get that right, you change education for the better, you change health for the better, you ensure taxpayer dollars are spent more effectively. You create governments that are looking to the future, not looking to the past, that are ready for the challenges that we've all seen governments face recently, the challenges of a worsening climate crisis, the challenges of COVID, the challenges of AI. Why wouldn't you want to work on that problem? And this question of why not has been one I've asked myself often, because across my career I've been asked, why are you so focused on businesses that lead to impact? Why not just work on traditional businesses? It's so much easier. And the question I ask back is, why wouldn't you work on businesses that can make the world better? To me, the alternative seems insane. Like, we have this short and precious life. We live in a world with so many problems, and those of us who are lucky enough to be born to great educations and to comfortable lives and to opportunity, I feel it's an obligation almost to do things that matter and leave the world better.